The Gospel of Luke, the 15th chapter. Jesus also said, "A man had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, 'Father, let me have the share of the estate that would come to me.' So the father divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son got together everything he had and left for a distant country, where he squandered his money on a life of debauchery. When he had spent it all, that country experienced a severe famine, and now he began to feel the pinch. So he hired himself out to one of the local inhabitants, who put him on his farm to feed the pigs. And he would willingly have filled his belly with the husks the pigs were eating, but no one offered him anything. Then he came to his senses and said, 'How many of my father's paid servants have more food than they want? And here I am, dying of hunger. I will leave this place and go to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as one of your paid servants.' So he left the place and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with pity. He ran to the boy, clasped him in his arms, and kissed him tenderly. Then his son said, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the calf we have been fattening and kill it. We are going to have a feast, a celebration, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate.
This is the tender, loving forgiveness of a wayward son. There is no greater love. Do we ever consider ourselves to be a prodigal child? Do we run to our loving Father seeking his life-giving, loving forgiveness? How grateful are we? I mean, this is the parable of parables because it reveals so many different characteristics of the God who called us into creation in the first place. But we have this child, this son of a father who doesn't act as he should have, and yet in the depth of his very being, he is always aware that in spite of his going away and doing the things he was doing, there was his knowledge of the love that the Father had shown him as a child. We are each a child of God, and yet each one of us is the prodigal child of God, because we each have gone to the distant country in our own way, which means that we have sinned. But in the depth of that brokenness, there is the knowledge that I am loved by God. And it's that warm love that remains that gives me the courage to get up and come back and say, here I am, Father, I sinned against you and against heaven. And the Father's already got his arms wide open to receive him long before he even gets a chance to say anything. This is our God revealing himself at the most profound level of the divine heart, where he says, let's celebrate. for this son of mine who went away and sinned, but has come back to me. Now we celebrate, we forgive him everything. Let's start over.
But there's something there too for the father
Oh, well, the
who
father.
knows, who has a child who is a prodigal. Like, that's a heartbreaking situation to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Especially when, you know, in this particular family, they were probably well-to-do. This child was probably spoiled and had everything. And then to come to his father and ask for a part of his fortune is just beyond belief.
Yes.
You know, that just doesn't happen. But the father responded and gave it to him. In the father's mind, I'm sure he knew quite well what was going to happen, because the father is representative of God, who knew exactly what all of us were going to do. Anyway, the son goes off and he spends all his money. Then he comes back home begging to be received. And the father receives him. But in the meantime, the father's sitting out on the front porch, looking down the road, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to see him come, worrying and being disturbed, you know, because he's being so wayward. And yet he sees him way down the road. He doesn't even wait for him to get to the yard. He goes running down the road and embraces him. I mean, it's a magnificent story of the love and forgiving heart of God.
What do you say to the fathers who are waiting on the front porch?
Mostly, I approach it this way. Thank you for coming. I knew that you wanted to come, but I had to give you time so that you could be prepared to share with me the reality. But now we're here together. I want to embrace you with my deep understanding of your situation, and I want you to know that I am asking God in his infinite love and mercy to bless both of us, you and me, for bringing us together so that I can help you in the journey that you are now going to face to recover. You know.
What are the things that prompt the prodigals to admit that they have a need to return?
I think that's a very, very important question. There is a deep movement inside, and I would like to think that it's because someone, somewhere in the world, is praying for that person. And that prayer moves the Lord to act on behalf of this individual. And suddenly it brings them to see, hey, maybe I need to get a change here. Maybe my life needs to go in a different direction, you know.
It's that light that all of a sudden is shined in a dark spot.
Exactly that. And it can happen in anyone, you know, believer and unbeliever, because God's active in all of us, whether we acknowledge that or not. So the power of prayer is one of the reasons why some of these people come back. But the second reason is the example that somebody close to them in the situation where they find themselves is supportive and encouraging and saying, well, you know, you don't have to remain in this situation. You can go home and get this straightened out.
And sometimes it's just a distant memory. Or they know about that, but they put it on a shelf and don't want to think about it until they get to a point where, oh man, that was, you know, that person really cared for me, and I know that I'm breaking their heart. I know that I am. It's so hard for us, though, to admit that we are sinners and that we have done wrong.
But I think the point that is missed so very much is that people zero in on the prodigal, but he's not the main character. The father is the main character in this story. And just the embrace that he gives his son and doesn't even allow him to say the words of asking for forgiveness or anything, because the father knows that's what he's coming to do, reveals the heart of God at its very depth. He wants to forgive us. That's why he sent his son.
And we think about prodigals. We think about how we all have that tendency to run from God. And maybe we think about people in our own circle of relationships and family who are even now in some distant country. And so we want to pray for them that they, even as we, may experience the grace of God as expressed in this wonderful parable. And so let us pray. O God, whose glory it is always to have mercy, be gracious to all who have gone astray from your ways, and bring them again with penitent hearts and steadfast faith to embrace and hold fast the unchangeable truth of your word, Jesus Christ, your Son, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God forever and ever.